The year was 1559, and the court of France was abuzz with preparations for a wedding that promised to end decades of war between two great Catholic powers, Spain and France. Elisabeth of Valois, the radiant 16-year-old daughter of King Henry II of France, was to marry Philip II of Spain, originally intended for Philip's son, Don Carlos. The match was altered for political and personal reasons, a decision that would change Elizabeth's life forever. Elizabeth was renowned for her beauty and grace, a princess whose soft features and warm smile won hearts wherever she went. Yet, beneath the exterior of royal poise lay a young woman with her own dreams and fears. She adored literature and art, often spending her afternoons sketching in the palace gardens. Her life in the French court, though surrounded by grandeur, was filled with love from her family, especially her father, who affectionately called her Ma Petite Lumière, my little light. The idea of leaving her home for a foreign land, to marry a man 22 years her senior, was daunting. On the day she departed for Spain, Elizabeth stood at the gates of the French palace, her heart heavy as she bid farewell to her siblings and mother. King Henry embraced her tightly, whispering, "You are a beacon of peace, my little light. Shine brightly, even in a foreign land." Elizabeth fought back tears, vowing to honor her father's wish. Yet, as her carriage rolled away, the weight of her new life pressed upon her, each turn of the wheel taking her further from the only world she had ever known. The journey to Spain was arduous, spanning weeks across rugged terrain and unpredictable weather. Elizabeth found comfort in the company of her ladies-in-waiting and the letters she wrote to her younger sister, Marguerite. In one letter, she confessed her mixed emotions. "I do not know this man who is to be my husband. They say he is kind yet distant, a ruler of great power but little warmth. I wonder if he will see me for who I am or merely as the symbol of peace I represent." Her first meeting with Philip took place in the palace of Guadalajara. The Spanish king, then 32, had a reputation for his stern demeanor and unyielding discipline. When Elizabeth entered the grand hall, her heart raced. Philip stood at the far end, his dark eyes watching her approach, dressed in a stately black doublet. He exuded authority and a certain aloofness. As she curtsied, their eyes met. Elizabeth offered a polite smile, but Philip's expression remained inscrutable. "Your Majesty," she said softly, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Princess," Philip replied, bowing his head slightly, "Spain welcomes you." Their exchange was brief, formal, and devoid of warmth. Elizabeth felt a pang of disappointment but reminded herself of her duty. The marriage ceremony followed soon after, a grand affair attended by dignitaries from across Europe. As Elizabeth stood beside Philip, she couldn't help but feel like a chess piece in a grand game of diplomacy. Life in the Spanish court was a stark contrast to the lively, familial atmosphere Elizabeth had known in France. The rigid etiquette and reserved nature of the Spanish nobility left her feeling isolated. Philip, though respectful and courteous, remained distant. He spent most of his time in council meetings, leaving Elizabeth to navigate her new surroundings alone. She found solace in the arts, commissioning paintings and writing poetry in the solitude of her chambers. Over time, however, Philip began to notice Elizabeth's efforts to integrate into Spanish life. She took great care to learn the language and customs, endearing herself to the court and the people. Estate banquets, she charmed foreign dignitaries with her wit and intelligence, proving herself not just a symbolic bride but a capable queen. Slowly, Philip's icy exterior began to thaw. One evening, during a rare moment of leisure, Philip found Elizabeth sketching in the garden. He paused, watching her with quiet curiosity. She looked up, startled, and quickly set down her pencil. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, I did not hear you approach." "There is nothing to forgive," Philip replied, stepping closer. He glanced at the sketch, a delicate depiction of the Alhambra's intricate arches, and raised an eyebrow. "You have talent." Elizabeth blushed. unsure if his comment was genuine or polite. "It is merely a pastime, Your Majesty." Philip's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. A pastime worthy of admiration. It was a small moment, but for Elisabeth, it was the first time she glimpsed a softer side of her husband. As months turned into years, their relationship deepened. Philip began inviting Elisabeth to accompany him on royal tours and consultations. In her, he found a confidant who listened without judgment, someone who offered insight tempered with compassion. Elisabeth, in turn, saw beyond Philip's stoic facade to a man burdened by the weight of his empire. Their bond, though subtle, grew stronger with each passing day. Despite the growing closeness between Philip and Elisabeth, the specter of Don Carlos, Philip's son from his first marriage, loomed over the court. Don Carlos was a troubled young man, his erratic behavior and violent outbursts the subject of endless gossip. From the moment Elisabeth arrived, Don Carlos seemed to harbor a fixation on her. His obsessive attentions made Elisabeth uneasy, though she tried to handle the situation with grace. One evening, Don Carlos confronted Elisabeth in the palace gardens. "You should have been mine," he said, his voice low and trembling. "It was you who was promised to me." Elisabeth took a step back, her heart pounding. "Your Highness, I am your father's wife. Such words are inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Don Carlos sneered. "What is inappropriate is that my father took what was meant for me." Elisabeth quickly retreated, shaken by the encounter. When she told Philip, his face darkened with anger. "I will handle this," he said curtly. The following day, Don Carlos was confined to his chambers, his movements strictly monitored. The court buzzed with rumors, but Philip refused to explain his actions, leaving Elisabeth to endure the scrutiny in silence. In 1568, tragedy struck. Elisabeth, who had long yearned to provide Philip with more heirs, became pregnant again. Her previous pregnancies had ended in heartbreak, and this one was fraught with complications. Despite her fragile health, Elisabeth remained optimistic, often reassuring Philip that all would be well. On a chilly autumn night, as the court prepared for another grand celebration, Elisabeth went into labor prematurely. The palace was thrown into chaos as midwives and physicians scrambled to save both mother and child. Philip paced outside her chamber, his usual composure shattered by worry. Hours passed, and the cries of the newborn filled the air, but the silence that followed was deafening. Elisabeth had passed away. Philip entered her chamber, his steps slow and hesitant. Elisabeth lay pale and still, her hands folded over her chest. The child, a girl, had survived but was frail. Philip stood over his wife's body, his face devoid of expression, yet his eyes betrayed an ocean of grief. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "You were my light," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time in years. Elisabeth's death plunged the court into mourning. Philip, who had always been a pillar of strength, withdrew from public life for weeks. He spent hours alone in his study, poring over Elisabeth's letters and sketches, each one a reminder of the warmth she had brought into his life. Though their marriage had begun as a political arrangement, Elisabeth had become a source of comfort and understanding in his tumultuous world. Her legacy endured not only in the hearts of those who knew her, but in the cultural and political ties she had helped strengthen between Spain and France. Philip, though often criticized for his emotional restraint, carried Elisabeth's memory with him for the rest of his life. Her presence had been a beacon in the shadowy corridors of power, a reminder that even amidst the harshest duties, there could be moments of genuine connection. In the end, Elisabeth of Valois was not just a queen. She was a light that briefly illuminated the life of a king burdened by the weight of an empire. And though her time in Spain was short, her impact was profound, a testament to the enduring power of grace, love, and resilience in the face of destiny.